Mm. Hi, Liana. Let's see. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, uh, well, for some reason, your sound is not going, Liana. Um, let's see. Okay. Mm, oh, okay. Okay. Hopefully, um, okay. Hopefully, excuse our chaos a little bit here. For some reason, my colleague's microphone was not working. If you're not one of the presenters, can you please mute your microphone as you come in, since I can't do it. I probably would not be good to do a general muting, since my colleague, when she rejoins us, would not have very good luck with it. Oh, sorry, looking several different places at once. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Looks like, forgive a little bit of the chaos. I didn't realize that the wrong meeting address got sent out on the original flyer. Hopefully, everybody got the correct one. I just realized that now. Ah! Okay. Chaos! Ah! Okay. Okay, Liana, can you hear? Can you? Let's see. Okay. The signal here indicates that your microphone should be working. I don't know why it's not coming over the presentation. Okay. Okay, hold on. I need to reply to Sylvia. Okay, sent. Okay. Oh. Okay. 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 Yeah. So my colleague is going to try to hook on from a different setting, the English department conference room. So give her a chance to do that. Still admitting a lot of people.
Yes.
Sorry about the chaos here. Yeah. Shows the old maxim is true. Anything that can go wrong will. AKA Murphy's Law. I had to do a quick email to another colleague because the advice was or the website was wrong. Okay. Catch my breath for a minute. All right. All right. So I'll go ahead and start talking about what I had planned to talk about before I turn things over to Liana to do her presentation, provided we can hear the microphone. So as you know, the title of the just gotta mute a few more. So let me get that. Okay. Yeah, if you're coming on, please mute your microphone. I can't do a general muting like I usually do for my solo presentations because one of my colleagues is presenting, provided we can get the microphone to work on the link to hers. For whatever reason, it doesn't. Okay, so we're looking today at conspiracy theories that could be true, and I use the example of the silly title I had a year and a half ago for a conspiracy theory presentation, whether alien. Okay, Carly, you just joined, so you probably haven't gotten hooked up to the audio yet. From what I'm on my end, I'm looking at the audio, and you haven't hooked up to the audio yet, Carla. Okay, so I used the silly example of alien time traveling Bigfoots going back in time to assassinate President John F. Kennedy, which of course is absolutely ridiculous, but it is one of many conspiracy theories. Yes, this will be, I am recording all of this. So it should be, I will be sending out a copy after I download it later on today to my students, but also to the English department. And if you want a copy, just email me at doakes@southtexascollege.edu. Okay, so now obviously alien time traveling Bigfoots didn't assassinate President John F. Kennedy. But certainly when you look at all the different conspiracy theories about the assassination, There are many, ranging from Lyndon Baines Johnson did it, his vice president, the CIA, Fidel Castro, the communist lead president then of Cuba, the communists, the Soviet Union. Oliver Stone had one in his movie Richard Nixon, where he kind of implied Richard Nixon did it. Of course, Oliver Stone is very famous and connected to the JFK conspiracy theory because he directed a 3-hour movie starring Kevin Costner called JFK that revolved all around the idea that there was a conspiracy to assassinate John F. Kennedy. And it was actually a pretty damn good movie and made a pretty convincing case. However, when you actually get down into the details of Oliver Stone's movie, it honestly just doesn't work very well in terms of actual theory being provable. Now, of course, there's a number of mysteries around it. You have the Zapruder film that seems to show JFK's head getting ricocheted back after he gets shot, and it seems like the angle for that would be bad. There are all kinds of stories about a mystery shooter on the grassy knoll. Some people believe there was a second shooter. Others, accept the idea that it could be quite simply the fact that there was several shots, and because it was in downtown Dallas and there was a lot of noise, there was all kinds of echoing effects. But and I've looked at a number of the conspiracy theories surrounding JFK, and there's one that I've always thought that might actually be true. And that specifically is the idea that the American mafia, Cosa Nostra, might have actually had a hand in the assassination. And so I'm going to use this example to establish basically some of the rules that I've kind of thought up to looking at a real conspiracy theory. Okay, so first of all, you have to have an understandable motivation. So while the Communist Party, when Fidel Castro and the communists of the Soviet Union might have, if they got caught, it would have caused World War III. Now, the 1960 presidential election between JFK and Richard Nixon was extremely close. We're kind of used to close elections in contemporary times, but this one was razor close, as in a few votes in one state one way or the other could have changed the outcome. So it's been argued and been reported that President John F. Kennedy's father, Joseph Kennedy, made a deal with the mafia, specifically in Illinois and a couple of other key states, to get enough votes to get JFK elected, especially in Illinois, where he supposedly made a deal with the late mobster Sam Giancana. Now, the reason this seems like it might actually be true is because President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's father, Joseph, had a long history with the mafia dating back into Prohibition. And it is often speculated that those ties may have continued. Now, it has been strongly suggested that that Joseph Kennedy saw that was going to be a close election, and so he cut a deal with the mafia and promised them basically that if they helped his son win the election, a lot of the investigations that were going on into the mafia would stop. Whether that's actually true or not is debatable, but given Joseph's history, the father's history with the mafia, and how close the election was, and how the vote in Illinois, which is kind of notorious for corrupt elections, may well have played a role in that, or made a difference. Now, of course, if this was the deal that Joseph cut, then things did not turn out as Joseph Kennedy had promised, because he had basically promised that JFK, the president, would kind of back off the mafia in terms of prosecution. Instead, President Kennedy appointed his brother Robert F. Kennedy as the Attorney General, and John F. Kennedy, and Robert Kennedy kind of launched a full-scale campaign against the mafia. And according to this, if true, obviously would have caused a lot of anger and resentment on the part of some mafia bosses, very powerful ones, who felt betrayed by it. And one of the other, just to jump ahead, I am getting to another big reason why I think that, if of all the conspiracy theories about JFK, the one with the mafia might be true. So after 2 or 3 years of pretty heavy prosecution by Robert Kennedy, it's said that some very powerful mafia bosses, Sam Giancana, Carlos Marcello of New Orleans, who was an extremely powerful mob boss in that era. Also, Santo Traficante of Tampa Bay of Florida, who was also one of the most powerful mobsters in the country, allegedly got together and planned out the assassination, not only as revenge for what they perceived as a betrayal, but also as a way to get Robert Kennedy removed as Attorney General. Now you might say, oh, that's nuts. The big thing, and that they recruited Lee Harvey Oswald as kind of a patsy and encouraged him and enabled him to go in and conduct the assassination. The one thing that really suggests that this might have some actual water to it is the fact that, of course, President Kennedy was assassinated, and Lee Harvey Oswald was later arrested pretty soon afterwards, coming out of a movie theater. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald was never questioned because, simply put, a guy named by the name of Jack Ruby, and this is famous, and it was caught up live on TV in front of everyone watching. Lee Harvey Oswald's being escorted out in handcuffs by a couple of Texas Rangers, and apparently just out of nowhere, here comes a guy by the name of Jack Ruby, who, in front of all the cameras and of every major news organization in the United States, shoots and kills Lee Harvey Oswald. Now one might say, God damn, they had really bad security, which, yeah, very true. But it has also been established that Jack Ruby had very close ties to the mafia, that the nightclub that he owned and operated had mafia connections. And so it's that link, the fact that Jack Ruby, he was connected to the mafia, was able to get so close to Lee Harvey Oswald and shoot him and basically shut him up before he could do any talking, that to me says this as a conspiracy theory could be true. Because there is that idea, that connection with Jack Ruby to Lee Harvey Oswald, which is, quite, or to the mafia. Now, does that mean it was true? No. Okay, just had to, excuse me there, just had to check. Okay, let's see, Leanna. Okay, the microphone is showing that it should be working, and it's not. Everybody else is coming over it and I have to mute them, but yours, the one that we need to work the most, isn't. Wonderful. Okay, yeah. There you go. The one microphone we need to work, and of course it doesn't. Technology works great when it works, but then when it doesn't, I look like a freaking fool. But I mean, seriously, I had to mute everybody else because, background noise comes in, but the one person I'm supposed to be presenting with, it doesn't work. It's a conspiracy by the mafia. They don't want the truth getting out. That's it. It's a conspiracy by the mafia. Even though anybody who would have been involved with the mafia and JFK's assassination is now long dead. Okay, so could the mafia have done it? Yes. Does that mean they did? No, not necessarily. Now, there's also reports of mafioso being overheard at dinner boasting about the assassination. Is that, could that be true? They may have been boasting about it. That isn't enough to prove that they did it. Now, someone might reasonably ask, if the mafia was responsible, why on God's green earth would they announce it to the public like that, or say it in public? Well, let me get into a few more. So basically, there would be some logical reasons why they might be able to get away in boasting of it. Okay. So first of all, there would be good reasons for both.
Hello, David?
Yes. Okay, now we can hear you.
There we go. I got it.
Okay, thankfully, finally, we got it to work.
There you go. Oh, thank you.
Yes, and this is where we in the English department demonstrate once again that although we might know a lot of stuff about writing and books and plays and novels, when it comes to technology,
yes,
we probably should be wearing skins and carrying clubs sometimes. We cavemen.
That's funny.
Because it kind of looks better.
I got help, so.
Yeah, well, so that's the breaks with technology sometimes. Okay, so so a couple of reasons why this thing might have got covered up or not talked about. during this period when the assassination took place, if it had been the mafia, we got to keep in mind that the FBI was still being run by J. Edgar Hoover, who for many years denied that the mafia even existed. In fact, he denied the mafia existed until he was basically dragged kicking and screaming into believing it. So certainly the notion that the mafia might have assassinated the president of the United States under J. Edgar Hoover's watch would have been something that he would have moved heaven and earth to keep secret, because it would damage his precious FBI. In fact, he didn't want to go after the mafia because he didn't think they could. He wanted to make it easier for his FBI to maintain a great reputation, and getting to the mafia could be difficult. Now, the American mafia itself almost never killed politicians or police. So, you know, if there was a mafia conspiracy, it would have been among a very few, and they would not have gone and got permission from, in the history of the American mafia, before you assassinated somebody of a high level, you needed to get permission from the ruling commission of the 5 main New York families and a couple of others. And one of the big ground rules that govern the American mafia both then and today is that you don't kill cops, you don't kill politicians, you don't kill district attorneys or judges. Obviously, killing the president of the United States breaks all kinds of rules for that. So if they did it, the mafia, of course, would not want anyone to find out or do anything to the members who might have done it. Because if it came out that the mafia had done it, they would be, instead of, making it easier on them with Robert Kennedy being removed, the entire force of the US justice system would be moving against them. So once it came out, the commission would have a vested interest in making sure that it never came out. Now, so let me wrap this thing up, this example up, and with summarizing some of the takeaways here for a true conspiracy theory. Okay, for a true conspiracy theory, it generally tends to involve a limited number of people, a small number of people, and it has a very limited goal that has an end game, like the mafia conspiring to assassinate the president. That would be it. Once they did that, that would be it. They've accomplished their goal. And then, of course, to cover it up and make sure they don't pay for it. It's got to have some logic to it. And like I said, the only reason I believe this theory above the others is that I've read a lot about the mafia. I've watched a lot of documentaries about the mafia. And so I've been able to put together enough ideas to say, this one might actually be true. There would be, if in fact the stories of John F. Kennedy's father were in fact true, it would make a lot of sense that the mafia might go after JFK as revenge. Again, emphasizing if that is true, it's never been proven. But again, there's a specific motivation to it that's logical. It's also something that we see, that has some other brain fart here, brain freeze, that has some other evidence in terms of Jack Ruby's connection to the mafia. So its limited goal takes place in a short period of time, has an endpoint, and has some logic that can be applied to it. So, the idea that the CIA would kill their own president is, there's no proof of that. But more than likely, Lee Harvey Oswald just acted on his own. But out of all the conspiracy theories, I think the mafia might have had a part. Okay, so thankfully I was able to kill enough time for Liana to get to enjoy so we could hear her. And she is going to be presenting a paper that she recently presented at the Popular Culture Conference, looking at the nature of good and evil in conspiracy theories. So this is conspiracy theories in general, not just those that might be true. And then I'll come back and talk about a couple of examples that I think support Liana's conclusion that I've recently ran into. Okay, Liana, you have the floor.
Thank you, David. In fact,
Okay, I'll mute it as soon as the microphone comes up so I can mute it. There we go.
I was going to say that I haven't presented it yet anywhere else. So this is the first time that I'm talking about these.
Oh, okay.
So tomorrow I'm presenting it at the conference. So you're my first audience. And first I want to give a couple of tips for recognizing conspiracy theories, since that's the theme of the presentation. So I want to start with that, and I'll talk about a couple of other things. How much time do you, like 20 minutes, something like that? Should I?
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay, so first of all, the general recommendation is to wait for time to pass to see if something sticks or not. Well, that's kind of a very simplistic way to see it, but it's true that throughout the years, more information comes out, right? Especially when things are declassified, and then historians come in and finally the truth and the lies or the fake information are separated. For example, now we can say that Julius Caesar was killed by his senators, right? It's not disputed. But with Kennedy, it's a little, still we have to sift through all that noise, and even something more recent, it's even more difficult to figure out if it's true or not. So usually time separates falsity from the truth. I mean, how much time? The thing is that it can
wildly vary.
For example, 9/11 happened a pretty long time ago at this point, but still the conspiracies are flourishing with that. So I wouldn't say that some people say 5 years. No, that's not. I would say several generations should pass before everybody comes down and they're not tempted to look for conspiracy theories. But another piece of advice is to see how fast the news story or the narrative develops. So conspiracy theories tend to develop very fast. So within a month of something happening, all the theories are put together, and usually they appear in videos where people make connections between different factoids and make links between different things. So the faster it develops, the more likely it is that it is a conspiracy theory and not a fact. Because usually the truth takes time. We can see now, we're looking at January 6th to see what happened. It's not overnight that you discover who did what and who was involved. And even when, they're interviewing people and they have a lot of access to what happened, and still it takes months and months. And people are frustrated. Why isn't it happening faster? Because the truth is not, because you have to make sure that you have the facts correctly, not just jump to conclusions. I mean, that's why lawyers say allegedly, right? Before everything is absolutely foolproof and the truth is out. I mean, the truth is uncovered beyond reasonable doubt. So yeah, if it's too fast, it means that there's something fishy about it. And now apparently we have AI systems that can spot conspiracy theories. I don't know how far what uses they've had so far. I don't know if anybody has used them officially in any capacity, but what these AI systems are able to see that we don't see is the level of complexity of a story. So usually the conspiracy theories tend to be, they seem complex to us because we're overwhelmed with facts, or pieces of information, and they seem complex because there's a lot. But when you start looking in depth, like vertically, so horizontally it seems like a lot, but vertically, all these stories connecting, there are graphs to show that. But anyway, when you cut one connection, everything falls apart usually with conspiracy theories, and AI systems are able to spot that. But in a real story, or in two stories, if you cut any part, if you remove any part, the rest remains standing. So it's the nature of conspiracy theories that they're held together by very thin threads. And if one piece is taken out, it falls apart like, dominoes. So these are some things that people talk about in relation to conspiracy theories and what's new, what's real news or fake news. But to go to this, some of the things that I discovered in my research when I was putting together my presentation. So one thing is I looked at psychology, or the psychology of conspiracy theories, and some explanations from a lot of psychologists, including they wrote books about it. So I looked at the tip of the iceberg basically, and try to put together a few coherent facts about it. So, for example, some people see commonalities between people who are drawn to conspiracy theories, and some of them are kind of not very flattering. For example, people who are very impulsive and self-centered tend to be drawn to them. People who suffer from depression and anxiety, even maybe people who have already some kind of paranoid fears are more prone to it. Of course, at the extreme end of the spectrum, we see kind of maybe mental disorders. But not everybody has to be mentally deranged, to fall for conspiracy theories, especially because they're entertaining and they're, some people, are fascinated by them. And so, yeah, there are some characteristics of people who are drawn to them. But beyond that, there's the real explanation of why people like conspiracy theories is that we have this fear of the unknown, right? So it's what we can't explain needs an explanation. And of course, for example, with 9/11, I actually watched a documentary made by, or where engineers explained, even engineers that helped build those buildings explain how they fell. And it was quite interesting. It was kind of above me, I'm not an engineer, but I tried to listen because I wanted to understand. And in part, I understood. It had something to do with the gas or the fuel being very hot and permeating all the metal structure, and then some screws became detached, and then everything collapsed because it was very heavy. But science usually, and that's one explanation that psychologists give, science tends to be off-putting because not a lot of us understand all the science. You may be an engineer, but you're not a doctor, you're not a biologist, or you may be a biologist, but you're not an engineer. So our reality is kind of is compartmentalized. Each of us has expertise in something, right? So whatever's beyond us, we tend to be frustrated. So there's a frustration that causes anxiety in relation to things that are scary, such as, the Twin Towers fell down. We have COVID, pandemic, whatever else is going on that is scary to us. So unpredictable events, things that are overwhelming to us, right, such as a pandemic or assassinations, tend to get people to gravitate toward conspiracy theories. So whatever is scary, it's easier to look for a simpler explanation. So just if you think about the past when humans were just learning about what makes rain fall and thunder and lightning, right? Before people could understand those phenomena, their simplest form, right? How condensation forms vapors and then they interact with dust and then they fall in rain. People didn't understand even that much about it. So because of fear of natural phenomena, they created explanations that seem simpler to them. There must be a person behind the cloud that sends lightning. So we tend to act in similar ways today. Whatever is overwhelming and we don't understand it, some people tend to take the easier explanation. And some of that leads to conspiracy theories, right? It's easier to say, look, I'll show you a video, and I watch some videos like that. I'll show you a video of Twin Towers falling and a video of a controlled demolition. You see how similar they are? It means that it was controlled demolition. So it's very easy. It's easier to say that than let me explain to you how fuel and how temperature, how this and that, and the rivets and this and all the explanation that, okay, you lost me. Same with the virus. It's easier to say, okay, created in a lab rather than, and I'm not saying it wasn't created in a lab, but we need time.
Yeah.
And we don't even have access to all the information that we need because it's kind of a totalitarian regime. So we may never have access to that information.
Yeah,
we
never will.
Yeah. Unless who knows what is unearthed in 100 years from whatever secret information they may keep. But anyway, so it's a tendency in humans to want explanations because explanations reduce our anxiety. So even if you see, pedophiles eating children, it's easier to read about that and say, yeah, now I know. That still reduces the level of anxiety than thinking, who are these politicians? What do they want? And it takes work to understand politics. It takes work to understand biology. And each of us has our own specialization, and we can't keep up with everything that is discovered in the world. So that's one explanation psychologists give for the popularity of conspiracy theories. But just in case anybody thinks that we invented conspiracy theories in modern age, that conspiracy theories have existed since history started happening, right? Since we had culture, since we had a community, human community, let's say. So, for example, there was a fire in Rome in the year 63. Conspiracy theories claimed that it was Emperor Nero who purposely set Rome on fire so that he could change Rome in the way he wanted it. And because he heard about those conspiracy theories, he became very angry and he blamed the Christians. He said the Christians set the fires. And then he proceeded to kill Christians and burn them at the stake and crucify them. Mm-hmm. So those things circulated a lot. And the more diversity you have, the more tendency people have to blame somebody who's different from them, and they want somehow to catch in the act of something bad so they can punish them or they can get rid of them. Just like Jewish people have been the subject of conspiracies for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Oh, yeah. Mm.
They were blamed for everything. So, including the fact that the Crusades failed. Whenever the wars were failing, it's the Jewish people. And so the Nazis were just the tail end of a whole history of blaming Jewish people for everything that was happening. So let me just go back to trying to find my file that I had just a couple of things that I was looking into. But well, one of the things that I was looking into is this idea that some of our stereotypes, some of our prejudices and biases also feed into our conspiracy theories. So it's always, as I said, somebody who's other, who's different, who is easier to put blame on, like Jewish people. But just to give an example that maybe is closer to audiences in the United States, the Salem witch trials, and generally witchcraft and witches being blamed for everything. And that's, in the Middle Ages in Europe, it was much more horrifying than here. I mean, not to say that hanging 22 people was not horrifying, but hundreds and hundreds of people were burned at the stake in Europe. But here in Salem, what happened was that a lot of people started to accuse each other of witchcraft. There were some girls, I'm sure most people are familiar with that story, the events that happened. Some girls were dancing in the woods. They said they saw the devil at some point when they started they were caught in the act. And so they started accusing people in town. And pretty soon it kind of exploded into witch hunt. So everybody was accusing everybody, and ended up with about 150 or 160 people in prison. If they admitted to witchcraft, they would be allowed to live. If they didn't admit, they would be hanged. So anyway, it was kind of the circumstances or the context of that event was there were a lot of wars fought with the Native Americans, and Native Americans were already seen by the Puritans as of the devil because they're pagan. But the Puritans were seeing everybody in the negative. Anybody who was not Puritan, Catholics, any heretics, anybody who was not Puritan, and even Puritans were suspicious of each other that they're not completely kosher. So there was kind of an atmosphere or a climate of suspicion generally. So anybody who was, your enemy, your neighbor that you kind of envy for having more goats than you, you're gonna say they're witches. And apparently there was also some mold in the rye that they made bread with, and maybe that led to some hallucination. That's another kind of speculation today. But yeah, we are, as humans, we have the tendency to try to find people to blame. And usually those to blame have to be the ones that we hate, right? Just like now, for example, in Russia, apparently even the church in Russia, the Orthodox Church, are blaming gay parades for the corruption of Ukraine. And that's apparently justification for Putin to go and kill everybody in sight. So yes, gay people are to blame for, the corruption of Ukraine. And by the way, Putin, I don't even want to say Mr. Putin because I don't respect him enough to call him Mr. But he is behind a lot of the conspiracies that we have today. They have troll factories and conspiracy theory factories in Russia that are behind a lot of the things that we probably have seen circulating even here in the United States, such as, Hillary Clinton eats babies, the Pizzagate, and all these things. I'm sorry if there's anybody who believes those as fact, but please try to take them with a grain of salt and try to check them against some real information, and maybe wait 10 more years to see when the dust settles what comes out of Hillary Clinton, the accusations against Hillary Clinton. So it's a way to neutralize people who are perceived as threats, to kind of cleanse, communally cleanse the society of whoever is perceived as a threat. That's one reason why conspiracy theories stick so well, especially when there's already a climate of hate, like in Nazi Germany. Hitler was only using what was already there, the hatred of Jewish people. So let me go, speaking of, because this leads me to the idea of good and evil. And we can see that, to me, conspiracy theories are not that different from stories that, we've had since the beginning of culture, like mythological stories of heroes and monsters and, heroes slaying the dragon and things like that. So there's a tendency in conspiracy theories to cast somebody as the good guy and somebody as the bad guy. And the good guy is usually a savior of humanity. For example, President Trump was supposed to save humanity of demons. Literally, a lot of people believe they're demons. They were demons that Trump was fighting. So the conspiracy, I'm talking about QAnon and what the QAnon believers or followers believe. Right now, they're kind of laying low, waiting for another resurgence of the theories, the conspiracy theories that will bring back that into focus, because even Q has not been dropping much in the last few months, I think. But anyway, QAnon, the focus of QAnon was around this idea that, and Q was not the hero. Q was the person in the shadows, and Trump was supposed to be the hero. And usually the mythological heroes, there's a theory, Joseph Campbell is the one that has kind of outlined the pattern of it, or the arc of the hero's adventure. So the hero usually has a fabulous circumstances of birth. I wouldn't say necessarily that Trump has kind of any unusual birth, except that he was born in maybe a family where he had a lot of advantages, and people look up to that, the small circle of rich people that they aspire to. So gold.
He fits the role of the outsider coming in to change things.
So there is a little bit of the hero there, right? There's something unusual about him. The hero is supposed to not be completely ordinary. The hero has helpers. So Q and QAnon are, Q, the person who drops the information, or makes the drops that are very cryptic, right? And this is kind of a supernatural, almost like a supernatural helper to the hero. And I mean, just to give you other examples, heroes have, when I'm talking about something unusual about a person's birth, even, for example, Jesus, if you see Christianity as in part a story, a narrative that we've internalized in our culture. Anyway, the birth of Jesus is also unusual, right? But in North Korea, they're trying to do that with Kim Jong-un. They're saying that somehow he was born out of maybe a virgin, I'm not sure, but there was a star. They kind of copied the Christian model, but the Christian model was not the first, right? I mean, there were some Indian gods that had the same virgin birth and star that led people to them and things like that. And if you think about it, we have modern mythologies like Superman, who's also born kind of miraculously, is brought on Earth by
from the rocket,
right? Or some weird crib that floated through space. Anyway, so these stories are very popular because they cast. You have a hero that is not completely a god, but it's helped by supernatural entities, and the purpose of the hero is to save humanity. So conspiracy theories are not that different from other stories we've been telling since hundreds and thousands of years, right? So then the enemy is, and today is very in flux. These narratives are in flux because also one of my claims in that presentation is that today it takes very little for stories to evolve because of internet, because of access to thousands of people, millions of people, right? And also the stories morph as more truths emerge. The stories quickly catch up with them so that they can cover up their gaps. And that's why I'm saying the conspiracy theories tend to happen very fast. The narratives are put together very fast because they're trying to keep up with actual facts that they see emerging. And oh yeah, we have that in our story. So so today it's a little different. We kind of jump from a story to a conspiracy to a cult to even a religion very quickly, whereas in the past this happened over hundreds and thousands of years, all these processes of stories transforming in our collective mind. So anyway, the bad guy is always different. I mean, whoever's a new president will be the bad guy for some conspiracies. I mean,
Yeah.
when Hillary Clinton was a candidate, I thought nobody could be seen as more evil than Hillary Clinton. And then I heard from some of my friends who are conspiracy theorists, who like conspiracy theories, that, oh yeah, President Biden is even worse. And how? Well, did you see the videos of how he smells the heads of children? That means he eats children. Okay, so this is how people put together the little bits of information, right? Video of President Biden smelling the head of a child, and the old stories of people eating children or bathing in the blood of children. And there you have it, 2 and 2 together. Therefore, President Biden eats children, although there's absolutely nothing in between to prove it, right?
Yeah, that's pretty far out there. Yeah, the one of the interesting things about the preferring good and evil is this semester I've run into a case where there was actually a scientific explanation that answered a long mystery, and people refused to believe it. So this is the Dyatlov Pass incident, which took place in the Soviet Union in 1959. Very briefly, 9 hikers were camping out in the countryside, and people lost contact with them, and then they were found. All 9 were found dead. And the scene of death was very mysterious. Their tent had been wrecked. 4 of their bodies were found at the edge of the forest, and then 5 others were found further on with pretty significant injuries to them. And so there's been all kinds of theories offered over the years about what happened. Some utterly ridiculous, like aliens did it, or killer Yetis, errant Russian missile strike. Some of the more plausible explanations may be, that there was a secret Soviet missile base near there. They might have seen something, and so the Soviet soldiers killed them off. They offended some local villagers. The local villagers killed them off. They offended some other group. One of them went nuts. Yeah. Some of them were kind of reasonable, but none of them really managed to explain all the different aspects of the case. So about 2 years ago, a group of scientists went to the Dyatlov Pass. Now, it wasn't named Dyatlov Pass then. The name was given after the leader of the expedition, I think Igor Dyatlov. And so this group of scientists ran computer animation after computer animation and test after test after test until they came to what appeared to be the logical sequence of events. And what they discovered is that there is a particular type of wind called katabatic winds, but it's just a type of wind that blows through the mountains and can get up to hurricane force. That the group had dug a ledge into the snowbank to try to protect themselves from the elements. Unfortunately, they had no idea that this katabatic wind was going to take place. And because they had dug into the angle of the snow line, it had weakened it. And so this created an avalanche where it normally would have. And very heavy blocks of ice collapsed onto their tent, smashing it and forcing them to flee in panic because they had to get out of they were found in not dressed in many clothes. They had to flee in a panic because they got exposed to the wind and they just had to run. They tried to come back and got lost. Several of them died very quickly because of whether others tried to go to help, to go into the forest, try to get help. They ended up getting lost and then dying on their own. And this was presented very effectively in a YouTube video by Anton Petrov, who is very good at communicating effectively the science and taking it and explaining it. And so I looked at it and go, okay, that's the answer. That answers almost 95% of everything that happened. And then I was looking this year, and I was suddenly finding like, people didn't seem to believe it. Now, there's some cases where there's a natural reason. So, for example, there was a 10-part fictionalized Russian miniseries called Dead Mountain or Mountain of the Dead that took the true events and sets them, in like a dramatic fictional account. So I can imagine why they didn't use that in there, because, it'd be kind of like you do all this great investigation and build up all this tension and then go, oh yeah, nature killed them. That's not going to work for a fictionalized story. Another one where a gentleman from the US, documentarian, did a feature film documentary called The Compelling Unknown Force about the Dyatlov Pass incident. So I watched that, and I was expecting him to bring up this scientific explanation, and instead he ended up with a conspiracy theory that a different group of locals ended up killing them because they violated some important site. And so the movie was made just about the time that the article may have been published. So to perhaps he didn't know at the point where the article was published, but also the simple implication it could be he chose to ignore it. Why? He had just made a feature film documentary about it that reached a certain conclusion, and then a study comes out that basically takes all the stuff that he did and throws it out the window. So I can understand that why he would, because he spent all that time making the documentary and then something comes out that completely contradicts it, he doesn't want to give it up. I mean, he's got financial reasons to do so because he spent a lot of time and money making this documentary. Doesn't mean that's right, but I can understand that motivation. But then I watched the Dyatlov Pass incident was featured in an episode of History's Greatest Mysteries, which, unlike some of the shows on the History Channel, Ancient Aliens, actually does a pretty decent job. And I was kind of shocked that some of the local populace, apparently this study was done as part of a reinvestigation, and they just simply refused to accept it. And it's just like, how can you not look at the science and see that this actually explains 99% of all the mysteries? But then when you mention good and evil, it suddenly occurred to me, okay, that's why they don't want to believe it. Because if they accepted the idea that it was just nature that killed them, they were just simply at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was just random fate, not anything sinister. They were just at the wrong point at the wrong time of year when nature struck, and a whole sequence of events happened that seem to be unusual, but actually do have a natural explanation when you look closely at it. But if you do that, you take away the idea of good versus evil, because a lot of them blame the Soviet government. Now, understandably, a lot of the local populations who weren't part of the power structure of the Soviet Union and now Russia, this is a way to make the Russian government and the current government look bad. Never mind that the Putin's government has absolutely nothing to do with the Dyatlov Pass incident, since that happened back in 1959. Although that hasn't stopped conspiracy theories before. Heck, even Shakespeare had conspiracy theory with the portrayal of King Richard III, where Richard III, the play describes King Richard going into a battle and killing a couple of prominent people, except the problem is that historically when the battle took place, King Richard was 4 years old. Unless he was a really precocious 4-year-old who could wield a sword and battle axe and go into a full medieval battle, I don't think he killed him. And not to mention Shakespeare's villain, who is great, he has the withered arm, yet somehow he rides a horse into battle at the end. Kind of tough to have control of a horse, hold a battle axe with a withered arm. Where did the third arm come from? So we even have, but Shakespeare was doing it for a logical reason. The folks that he was writing for, the Tudors, were the ones that overthrew King Richard III. And so making the previous king who was overthrown by the current monarchs was not a very good idea. So heck, even Shakespeare can do it. And so I can see why the folks with the Dyatlov Pass incident want to hold on to that belief of, that Dyatlov and the hikers were victims of an evil government and soldiers, as opposed to the reality where it was just Mother Nature. But I thought that was just that was a stunning example of a place where science can explain it, and it can be explained in very simple, understandable terms, yet people still refuse to believe it. Now, I
was going to mention that what you reminded me of is that Bermuda Triangle is one kind of fascinating part of the world that has been debunked by scientists long ago. All the disappearances are basically blamed on storms now, because it's kind of a bad place where storms can meet from two different directions. And it's a place where the storms usually take a corner and become stronger. But people still like to make movies about the Bermuda Triangle. Are still fascinated by it as a story.
Yeah. Well, and actually that is very appropriate, because there were also some things in the Bermuda Triangle, like there's stuff that can really mess with navigation equipment. There's ley lines and metals and so forth in there that can really F up some navigation equipment. And so that can also account for a lot of the disappearances. But people still want, it's aliens, it's other dimensions. I mean, if there's a conspiracy with the Dyatlov Pass, it was probably that the investigation was suppressed by the Soviet Union. But that was standard operating procedure for them. They suppressed anything that made them look bad, that they perceived might have made them look bad. Another recent example.
Even of Chernobyl right now, they're suppressing. They suppressed it for so long that their own soldiers did not know how radiated the place was. They didn't comprehend it.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering. I saw that in the news. It's like, the soldiers are occupying Chernobyl. Are they nuts? Do they not know what happened there? It was not just a little fake TV series. Yeah, it was the worst nuclear meltdown in history. Another one, but this one is kind of, I think, more rooted in emotion. It deals with the disappearance of Malaysian Air Flight 370, 2013, where a jumbo jet carrying 239 people disappeared from without a trace. And through a lot of investigation, at first there were all kinds of crazy theories that went into an atmospheric black hole, got a ridiculous stuff. And ultimately, it was pretty much determined that it was a suicidal mass murder suicide by the pilot. But the plane itself has never been found, because he apparently took it into the Indian Ocean. And so Sky News Australia has done 3 different documentaries concerning it. Two which were like MH370, The Untold Story, and a more recent one looking at the possibility of finally finding it, as a British aerospace engineer had developed a rather ingenious method using shortwave radio signals to trace the path of the airplane, because it would have been the only plane in that area, and he seemed to have found the location where it probably is. And the reason I believe that was because when they were first searching for the plane, they had a straight path drawn. And if the pilot wanted to make sure the plane was never found, like I theorized he probably did, why would he fly in a straight path? And the guy, using this new technique that he developed, showed that the plane changed direction a number of times. And that's when I looked, I go, okay, that's probably it. But Sky News did another entry in the documentary series that kind of revisited things and talked about the new theory. And they talked to a woman who had been widowed. Her husband had taken that flight, and he was on his way to China to work at a mine there. help make a lot of money, and he ended up being on that flight and ended up dying. And she's been waiting for 8-9 years to get some resolution. She's since moved on with her life and remarried, but still this hangs over them. And she was talking about how she felt there was a conspiracy between the Malaysian government and Australia's government and others to hide where it was located. Could there have been a conspiracy in the Malaysian government because they own the airline and it was their pilot? Yeah, that may well be that they're trying to hide somewhat of the pilot's responsibility or cover that up. But with the Australian government, no. But she's operating from the point of something that is extremely emotional for her, that is very, very, very deeply personal. And so that's a case where even though the conspiracy theory she believes in is illogical, I don't begrudge her that at all, because this is so deeply personal to her in a way that for most of us can't even begin to imagine, because it's so, she literally lost the man she had originally married. And that's, and I think with the distance of time, like you said, Liana, that will probably fade away, and she'll, probably, come to a more reasonable point of view. But it's also something rooted in extreme frustration that why can't they find, how can you not find a freaking jumbo jet at the bottom of the ocean? Well, when it's one of the deepest parts of the oceans in the world, and there's very little traffic there, and the weather is consistently pretty rough, you'd be surprised how tough it can be to find a very large airplane.
How long did it take for the Titanic to be found?
Yeah, exactly. It sank in 1912, and it wasn't found till the 1980s. Now, of course, part of that is that you didn't have the technology to go down to the depth where the Titanic sunk. Safely. You just can't get a bunch of people in scuba outfits and dive to where the Titanic is. You'd all be dead due to the pressure. But, it's also very dark, and, you think, well, wouldn't people know where the world's most famous sinking of a ship took place? Well, we knew the general area, but it's kind of tough to mark a map or to draw an X on the ocean. It tends not to float very well if you draw something there. Yeah. So, and that's the most famous shipwreck in the world, and it took almost 70 years to locate it. Now, of course, technology is much more advanced now, and so maybe the air flight will be located. But if there was a conspiracy there, it was just briefly done by the Malaysian government. One could talk about the 2020 election. There's still controversy raging about that. There were conspiracies like that Trump was set up, voting machines. Bill O'Reilly actually had a pretty fascinating explanation of it, that the Democrats were able to take advantage of the COVID laws and the emergency situation to do a lot of ballot harvesting. So President Biden did win, but one could argue that that may not have been the outcome without the ballot harvesting, or it would have been a much closer
Except there was no proof of the ballot harvesting.
Yeah, well, that too. But Bill O'Reilly is a pretty good journalist, whatever his personal issues might be over the past. He's still, pretty good. And this was a logical theory. Whether it's completely true or not, we'll probably not know for a long time for sure. But, it's easy to kind of look at illogical conspiracy theories. For example, I heard one from the 1920s where supposedly somebody had gotten into the secret Vatican library that the guy said ran 85 miles under the Vatican. And it had all kinds of bookshelves for all that 85 miles. Like, wow, that's a lot of books. but you could tell it was bull crap. Why? Because amazingly, the guy happened to just find the books that revealed that aliens were involved with all of human civilization. Wow, isn't that lucky? 85 miles of bookshelves, and somehow the guy finds the exact ones that rewrite human history. Yeah, right. Or a guy that wrote an alternate history of the Earth involving aliens, Zecharia Sitchin, who wrote this immense 13-volume alternate history of the Earth. It reads like a frickin' Tolkien novel or a Star Wars series involving the Anunnaki. It actually tells a pretty damn good story from what I've heard. And he claimed to translate this from ancient Sumerian tablets. There's one problem. He was a self-taught translator, and an actual expert in the language took about 2 minutes to debunk his entire theory. The guy didn't translate the right language. He didn't know what he was doing. So all 13 volumes are just utter and complete fantasy. Yet, even though it, this is like the, ultimate, alternate history of the Earth that's being suppressed, the philosophy of this group that is tied to this theory is kind of live and let live, to live a peaceful life at others and with yourself. And so it's like the stuff they believe in is just, not realistic and believable, yet if it helps them live a life where they're at peace with themselves and others and don't do harm to others.
That's the key. If they don't do harm. But once politics gets involved, it becomes more difficult to see it as harmless.
Yeah, if for those that actually adhere to the idea of live at peace with yourself and others, it's hard for me to want to contradict them because I don't want to. If it helps them live a good life, I don't know that it's right to disturb that. Even though the history that they're saying would probably make me roll on the floor with laughter, yet there's a degree of complexity to it, and the core beliefs that they espouse don't seem to be harmful. I mean, God knows there's enough different beliefs that want to involve killing other people and doing murderous and like, let's invade another country and because they're supposedly a threat to us. Somebody just says, so I believe in an alternate history involving aliens, but I'm happy with my life. There's a hell of a lot of worse things that you can believe in.
Well, there are people who take Star Wars literally, so.
Yeah, well, and people that live according to Star Trek. Living your life according to Star Trek would not necessarily be that bad of a deal. If you adopt the core values of the Federation, that actually isn't that bad of a thing. They might be looked at as weird, but, if they live a happy life and don't do any harm to others, that's, pretty damn good.
Sure, but I would add that there are conspiracies that are really harmful that really we have to be vigilant about, like, Boston bombing, Sandy Hook, all these things being fake, and people are kind of harassed and attacked.
And those are usually can be debunked with time or simply explained to somebody, let's wait till we get more information before we reach any conclusion. Like using the example of the tragic death of Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback Dwayne Haskins this past weekend at 24 years old. Now, I haven't heard of any conspiracy theories setting in yet, and hopefully none will. But I think the authorities made the right move in saying, we're not going to release any information until we've got everything together, and then we'll release it to the public. I think that's perfectly reasonable, and I think it's actually worked. I've watched some sports talk shows, and I haven't heard any crazy ass speculation, which is kind of amazing when you consider something, how something like this can often run, like, oh, he was killed by this group or that group who were trying to do this or that. Now, going back to the US, I mean, the government conspiracy theory of the ancient aliens, is kind of the old go-to excuse. We have no physical proof, so it's the government's trying to keep it secret. It's used so frequently that it's ridiculous to believe. Now, could there be something to the idea, like, for example, last year, the UFO report released to Congress that talked about the video footage of the UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, filmed by the Navy pilots? Is it fair to say that probably the military has much clearer footage and didn't release everything they know? Yes, I think that's reasonable. But again, it's limited in scope. It's just one certain thing. And also the military probably doesn't know exactly what they are. And so they're not going to engage in speculation. Also, but if they are US military aircraft, of course they're not going to announce that. If we had military equipment that advanced, that's so much more advanced than anything that Russia or China have, of course we're going to keep it a secret. Because, if it was revealed that we had military equipment that so far advanced with, what's going on with Russia, who the hell knows what would happen? This would be something you don't break out unless you absolutely need it. And so maybe the UFO stuff is a cover. That would be logical. It's happened before with stealth technology. Nobody believes stealth bombings or the stealth technology until, oh, here's the stealth fighters and bombers. They're actually real. Science fiction became science fact. So is it reasonable to say that the government is probably not telling everything they know? Yes, I think that's probably reasonable to conclude. Does that mean they grab every piece of UFO evidence that ever existed? No. It's like there was supposedly a UFO crash in Chihuahua, New Mexico, or not Chihuahua, Mexico. And sure enough, it's supposed report the US military swept in and grabbed all the evidence and took it back across the border and hid it. So yeah, we technically did something that could have resulted in a war with our southern neighbor in order to cover up UFOs, and nobody knows about it. Yeah. Or the ones that say the Smithsonian is covering up the true history of the Earth. That one really makes me laugh. The Smithsonian can barely get funded to stay open sometimes, and yet they have enough power to hide history and secrets in a vast academic conspiracy.
But this is one general trait of conspiracy theories. They always involve, I mean, that's why it's a conspiracy, because there's so many people who are hiding something from you. And many times it would involve a lot of people staying silent. And they could be paid to talk very easily. But it doesn't make any sense. So many people would
That's
hide
why I say
something.
limit. That's why one of the things I say about true conspiracy theories is that they're very limited in scope, because people have trouble keeping secrets. And you can't tell me that out of all this time of all these secrets that nobody would have talked and had come forth with concrete proof. That's not to say that maybe Roswell, there wasn't some factual idea to that Roswell might have been an alien ship. It's impossible to tell. It could have. There are some credible accounts by those that found it, but it gets so mixed together, and the government covering up is so frequently used. It's impossible to believe. Like there may be some ideas, like the legitimate science shows that actually investigate the fantastic, that take a scientific approach, like Expedition Bigfoot or Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. Those provide some evidence and scientific evidence that there's something really weird going on. like at Skinwalker Ranch, that might involve, extraterrestrials from far back in time, and it cites Native American, art to support it. But that's vastly different than saying aliens built the pyramids, or aliens built Machu Picchu, or built all these ancient monuments. It's one thing to say, if aliens are watching us now, then it's not unreasonable to assume if they're observing us now, kind of like an anthropologist might in the wild, that they're watching us for science, to see how we developed as a, and looking at us to learn more about as evolution and the history of life in the universe. That they might have been doing that for a very long time. That's one thing to say. If they're watching us now, they may have been observing Earth for a very long time. That's a lot different than saying.
I would say that the fear of invasion makes zero sense to me, because if they have the technology to come all the way here, why would they just stop on a planet that didn't have people on it? People with weapons, species with weapons, they would just find a better planet.
Yeah, and if they wanted to conquer us, if they can go between star systems, they could pretty much wipe us out. Independence Day as a movie notwithstanding. Realistically, if we are being observed, it's probably they may well have been doing that for a long time, and there may have been people in the past that saw UFOs. That does not mean that it connects to the entire history of Earth's been written by aliens. Probably one of the most ludicrous examples I've seen of a conspiracy theory was a 2-hour YouTube video where the guy was seriously discussing, did aliens travel back in time and kill the dinosaurs so humans could develop? There's so much inherently illogical about that statement. It doesn't even make a good story. Because if aliens went back in time to kill the dinosaurs to make sure they developed, they would obviously know that we already developed. So why would they have to go back in time to change history if we already developed?
Frankly, I believe that a lot of the people who develop such theories just want attention. They have different motivations. Some people want, I'll just tell a little anecdote. I mean, a little story about the Boston bombing. I noticed immediately after the bombing, these theories, conspiracy theories sprouting, that, crisis actors, and there was a video that I actually went and watched just for curiosity to see how they do it. What exactly is a conspiracy theory about that? And, they were putting together images, see how in this image there's a leg, and in this image there's not a leg, and there's a blood here and blood not here. Anyway, I asked the question to the person who posted this. I said, you're American. If you really want to know if they died or not, or if there are people without legs in a hospital, why don't you go to Boston and find out where the hospital is and visit them and see what happened? And he, immediately cursed me, cursed the victims. And finally he said, how many followers do you have? Do you see how many millions I have? And then he erased me from the site. Then he blocked me. So then I realized that's all that it is. He just wanted followers.
Yeah, he wanted attention. And that, unfortunately, I think that really takes away from the serious, legitimate study of, potential, extraterrestrial visitors, because there are legitimate, serious cases that are backed up with very serious claims and expert testimony, like the Navy pilots. And it's so easy to dismiss when you get these, far out tinfoil hat brigade types.
But it's interesting, right, to see a little, what they call the tic-tac in the water. That's much less interesting than, building pyramids and planting human seeds on Earth. And it's just, we want stories that are more interesting than reality.
Although to me, I think it's the exact opposite. The tic-tac flying on the water, going under the water is far more interesting, because it's also one that is extremely realistic. And, if it's discovered that these are alien craft and they're eventually revealed themselves to us, that's going to be an event that will change the history of the Earth forever. And it would be an amazing and incredible moment for every human being on the planet. Or if it's proven that something like Bigfoot is real. You know, when people dismiss Bigfoot followers, you know, when you bring up, it's like there's actual legitimate scientists who believe in Bigfoot. Even the greatest primatologist of all time, a scientist who studies great apes, Dr. Jane Goodall, believes in Bigfoot. I mean, you know, and normally you'd say, you know, somebody who thinks that aliens are talking to him in his mind are nuts. Yet there is a quantum physicist who went on Twitter and said that aliens were communicating with him in his mind. And I forgot his name. I just had it at the tip of my tongue. Now I forgot it. But, you know, this guy wrote down what he thought aliens were communicating, and he showed it to his fellow physicists, and they couldn't just debunk it. Some of them were actually convinced by him. And I mean, normally you'd think, oh, this guy thinks he's being talked to by aliens. This guy's a quantum physicist, though. He's a genius. This guy's incredibly smart. It's kind of tough to just say, he's crazy. But when you know, he has that kind of scientific base to it.
I would imagine that even a scientist could have, you know, hallucinatory.
Yeah, I know that's quite
maybe, but
that's quite possible. I mean, yeah.
If there's anything new that is provable in what he says, like not something that he studied, but something that is nothing that was known before to him or to his colleagues, maybe.
Yeah. Well, then we'll see how it turns out. He's got a company that he's trying to develop ideas for. Okay. So, you know, it's going to be pretty.
Quantum physics is real. I mean, that's something.
Yeah. And when you have somebody of that qualification talking about this kind of stuff, that's when you can take it legitimately seriously. And you can watch us like Expedition Bigfoot or Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch and see the scientific method at work. And the quantum physicist actually had a video where he proposed, you know, altering or developing a new scientific method to measure things that cannot be observed or measured physically. And I thought that was quite a fascinating proposal. So, you know, sometimes when, you know, there are conspiracy theories that can be real. I mean, you have to do a lot of digging and thinking for yourself. Usually it's pretty easy to cut through the crap. You know, if you just start talking about aliens building pyramids, just walk away. You know, they're kind of, just don't bother. Although, you know, even somebody that kind of, if they, you know, somebody who looks like they might be off, you know, you can't necessarily reject that. I mean, look at pictures of Albert Einstein. You know, he wasn't exactly running around wearing a three-piece suit with his hair slicked back. He constantly looked like he had stuck his fingers in electrical sockets, yet he's one of the greatest geniuses of all time. And his theories are still being proven correct decades after he passed away. So, you know, you can have people that kind of look strange that actually have utterly and completely brilliant ideas, and stuff that seems to be way out there tomorrow might be scientific fact.
So we'll have to wait for time to pass. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that too. It's hard to determine the truth of something in the immediate moment. You need more details and information. And sometimes even the conclusions that you've reached, if you get new information that contradicts them, there's nothing wrong with altering your perception and views of things. Like I used to think that anybody who embraced the ancient alien stuff was utterly and completely nuts and should be corrected. And then I watched some of the videos where they were talking about achieving inner peace with themselves. And I was suddenly thinking, well, I got to start to maybe reconsider what I was thinking, because maybe, you know, they folks deserve a little bit more consideration than that. You know, that things are more complex. And that's one of the things too, that when you look, you see the conspiracy theories that are too simplistic. Even with something like the mafia assassinating JFK, there's a lot of moving parts to it. There's a lot of parts of the story. The scientific explanation for the Dyatlov Pass, there's a lot of things that happened. It can be put into a chain of events, but simple explanations often do not apply with these things. And there's a lot of complexity there that has to be understood. And I think too, for us as educators and scientists and you know, it's one of the things that we sometimes need to work on is communicating clearly and communicating ideas. Like Liana, you expressed that with in the engineering videos on 9/11. You know, because you know, you want to try to prove your case with scientific evidence, but then there's trying to present that evidence in a way that everybody can understand it, which is not always easy to do, especially with hardcore engineering and science. Right. And ironically, in some of the YouTube videos I found, I've sometimes found that somebody doing a YouTube video is able to answer questions in a more understandable fashion than aviation experts. You know, going back to MH370, they're at the end of the original MH370, The Untold Story, there was the Australian Prime Minister appeared and saying, well, if the plane isn't located there, it could be anywhere. And I was like, wait a minute, they just spent a good 90 minutes saying they were almost certain this was the path the plane took. But now somebody who's an expert saying it may not actually be there. So wait a minute, is this trajectory they had real or not? What's going on here? And there were other theories that some of which were kind of far out, but a couple of which seemed to have scientific legitimacy. But I didn't think, it's like the people seem to know what they're doing, yet the pathway that they projected was like a massive curve away from where the plane was thought to have gone down. So it's like, are these people just ignoring some evidence? What's going on here? So I found a 20-minute video on a YouTube channel, Curious Droid, done by a high school engineering teacher, who explained that the system they used to track the plane was intended to communicate maintenance information, not a precise path of the plane. That could tell you the plane was still in the air, but it would not be an exact path. So it's like, oh, okay, that's the reason. And I found it in a video on YouTube done by a high school engineering teacher, whereas the 90-minute video constructed, or a 3-hour documentary done by professional journalists using professional aerospace engineers and professional aviation experts couldn't tell me that one thing in a 3-hour documentary. You know, and honestly, I think they just didn't think about it. They were focusing on telling the story of the victims, that they forgot to say, you know, maybe somebody's going to look at this and go, how do you know that the path was straight? If he didn't fly a straight path, the plane could be anywhere. And it's just, you know, sometimes you get the correct information from the most unexpected of sources. I think that's a good thing to keep in mind.
And I think we all should remember that we shouldn't be afraid to do what the GPS does. It says recalculate, right? You have new information, you deviate, recalculate, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Be open-minded. And you know, that the late great Carl Sagan, that was one of his extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, the Sagan standard. But part of that is also approaching things with doubt and skepticism, but not cynicism. Being willing to consider all the pieces of evidence before you, but also holding it to a very high standard to make sure that you get the best evidence possible, but always being open-minded. I think that's a good lesson to learn. Okay, so thank you very much for everyone who joined us.
I'm glad I could be heard in the end.
Yeah. Well, thankfully I had structured it in my mind. It's like, okay, I'm going to go first with the JFK stuff. So that ended up working perfectly because I was able to cover that period where you were getting to the point where you could get the equipment to work. And like I said, this it seems like we always get a humility lesson when Liana and I try to do something like this. We did it last year with The Walking Dead, and she had a PowerPoint presentation, and so here I am holding up the Kindle that she had a PowerPoint on because I couldn't figure out how to fit it into the Zoom meeting, which I was having. Like, it is good to remain humble because and to be able to laugh at ourselves when things don't go right, because I think it's a good thing to be able to laugh at ourselves and realize and make fun of our own limitations, because it's what makes us all human, you know. And God knows we could use a lot more laughter in the world today.
True
and
that.
A lot more. Yeah. I know there are things that need to be taken very seriously. I mean, certainly like the Russian invasion of Ukraine is no joking matter at all. But yeah, it would be nice if we
here, so we need to keep on living.
Yeah. And it's good, and it's also good to remember the lessons of history too. I mean, I've seen even among some of our colleagues, they're kind of so worried about something awful happening, but we've had nuclear weapons as a threat to the world since almost 1945 forward. We haven't destroyed ourselves yet. And I think if we've managed to go this long, we'll make it. Although I got to admit, I don't think I'm ever going to view Kim Jong-un as a facsimile of Jesus.
Or Superman.
That's a good one. Oh God, I'm now imagining Kim Jong-un in a Superman outfit. Oh, I'm not going to get that image out of my mind.
There is one image that I saw of that, yes.
Oh God. Skin tight outfit of Kim Jong-un. Oh my God, that's so scary. Okay, and I'll end it with this joke. It's said in public speaking that, to make yourself less nervous, you're supposed to, imagine your audience naked. However, I firmly believe that you would not want to do that in front of Congress. Because if you were speaking to Congress and you imagine them naked, you are probably going to go completely insane or run out of the place screaming in horror. Oh my God, naked Congress people!
Or put them all in superhero costumes in your mind, and then it'll be like a fun convention.
Oh dear God, that's even worse. Nancy Pelosi is the Scarlet Witch
in Congress.
Okay, although admittedly Avengers Endgame, Chubby Thor, that's an exception to the rule. Okay. Okay, we're just getting silly here. Thank you again for everyone who joined us.
Well, thank
hope
you.
learned something from it. If you're in one of my classes, just send me an email or a Blackboard message that you attended, and you get the extra credit. Again, thank you.
I'm going to post this for my students too. They're not here, but I will post the video.
Yeah, and I will be sending everyone a copy of the video once I get it downloaded, and I'll send it to Liana and everybody to, it'll be on the YouTube, her YouTube channel. I don't have one. That would probably be too dangerous. I might actually do a lot of videos, which kind of be scary. So no, I already have enough to do as it is. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a very wonderful semester break, aka Easter break. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. And until next time, this is Dr. David Oakes signing off.